This taper talk is a complete and total misdirection. So there's a lot of taper talk going on now because of the reverse repos. However, there is a very, very, very clear math problem, and that has to do with the amount of spending that the Biden administration and Congress, there is a lack of net US Treasury demand from China and a lack of US Treasury demand from Japan for the pension funds and banks in Japan. Biden is already talking about a planned $6 trillion worth of spending in 2022. Just this week, the Fed's official balance sheet added another $32 billion. The majority of those purchases were US Treasuries. This is the largest US Treasury purchase in 6 months, according to hedge fund manager Tavi Costa, who just put out a chart on this on his Twitter. I'll put a link to it in the information and description section. So the US spending for the federal government, on top of the budget deficits, additional spending programs, and they're talking about raising taxes on corporations, but corporations will just pass those taxes on to customers through shrinkflation or higher costs of goods and services, and then taxing high earners, which the government is cheating, starting with the Trump administration, by moving people who don't make a lot into higher income tax brackets and the alternative minimum tax. So you have a situation here where you have the government, the federal government here in the US, wanting to spend even more, trillions more actually, and there's a lack of foreign demand from US Treasuries. The Fed's balance sheet has grown a little bit. It's nowhere near the levels that it should be. So off balance sheet, there has to be trillions in special purpose vehicles of these toxic assets that the Fed is buying. On top of that, as part of the misdirection, while all these mainstream people are talking about deflation, taper talk, too much cash in US and European banks from the reverse repo, the Federal Reserve Bank announced that it's going to set up a permanent repo facility that a bunch of different non-bank entities can post collateral and borrow from. So if there was too much cash in the system, that probably wouldn't be happening. The entire fiat currency and credit debt Ponzi scheme is way over leveraged on trades, and there's way too much debt from governments and corporations, and the credit and debt is still growing. And there's no cash flow to pay back the debt or even service it at this point. So the Fed's official balance sheet is going to be over $8 trillion in the not too distant future. The real number is much, much larger than that, but I doubt we're ever going to see a real independent audit, even if George Gammon and Robert Barnes spend millions of dollars and years trying to sue the Fed to get an independent audit. I doubt we're going to get too much out of it, unfortunately, because I've read the lawsuits where the Fed is sued, and they argue both sides. Sometimes they claim that they're a government entity. Sometimes they claim they have private sector company protection. That's how messed up things are. Finally, if you like content like this and want to help keep content like this free so it doesn't all end up behind a paywall, please chip in $5 a month to become a patron. There is over 150 articles, charts, and audio podcasts behind the paywall, including 8 new articles in the last 4 or so weeks. And I have an interview with Sandstorm Gold CEO Nolan Watson recorded that's about 45 minutes long, and I'm going to be working in the next couple days on getting that out there for patrons. I'm not sure if I'm going to be releasing that for free or not. We'll see. But there are a lot of benefits to signing up to become a patron for only $5 a month, the cost of a bad cup of coffee. You're going to get a lot of in-depth research, analysis, and financial education for probably the best price out there in this space. So thanks for listening. And the bottom line here, it's a misdirection. It's smoke and mirrors. It's more lies from government officials and the Fed. The real problem is the budget deficits and the lack of foreign demand for US Treasuries. And the Fed is going to be moving more and more and more of these asset purchases, these toxic asset purchases, off balance sheet because they're legally allowed to do so now. As of March 2020, when the US Treasury and Fed were basically allowed to merge, and the US Treasury granted the Fed legalized authorization to create special purpose vehicles similar to what Enron did, and also similar to what organized crime has been trying to do with offshore shell companies.